Good morning. I'd like to welcome all who are with us this day as we have a little departure from our standard format for the live stream service. We are going to be doing a hymn sing featuring hymns selected by members of the Salem community and presented in an order of worship similar to one that we did back in March as well. The theme for our beginning is Gathered in and Set Apart. And for that, we will use the hymn, Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. This hymn is taken from a text also known as the Prayer of St. Francis, attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. Francis was an Italian Catholic friar and preacher. He founded the Men's Order of Friars Minor, the Women's Order of St. Clare, and the Third Order of St. Francis for men and women not able to live the lives of itinerant preachers, followed by the early members of the Order of Friars Minor of the monastic lives of the Poor Clares. Although he was never ordained to the Catholic priesthood, Francis is one of the most venerated religious figures in history. This text was put to the music of South African songwriter Sebastian Temple in 1967. Temple grew up in South Africa and later moved to London, where he worked for the BBC on news broadcasts relating to South Africa. Sebastian converted to Catholicism and spent much of his time composing music for worship. He is best remembered for the Prayer of St. Francis, which was played at the funeral of Princess Diana. Forgive us, Lord. Change us, Lord. The hymn we use here is Be Thou My Vision, an old Christian hymn of Irish origin. This work was translated in 1912 by Eleanor Hull and was sung to the Irish tune of Slane since 1919. Slane is a tune associated with the ballad of With My Love on the Road in Patrick W. Joyce's Old Irish Folk Music and Songs. It became a hymn tune when it was arranged by David Evans and set to the Irish hymn Be Thou My Vision, published in the Church Hymnary in 1927. Slane is named for a hill in County Meath, Ireland, where St. Patrick's lighting of an Easter fire, an act of defiance against the 5th century pagan king Leir, led to his unlimited freedom to preach the gospel in Ireland. Grace and mercy are ours. The hymn sung in this section of our worship service is Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound. The words of this well-loved hymn were written by English poet and Anglican clergyman John Newton. Newton was born into a Christian home, but his devout mother died when he was 7, and he joined his father at sea when he was 11. His licentious and tumultuous sailing life included a flogging for attempted desertion from the Royal Navy and captivity by a slave trader in West Africa. After his escape, he himself became a captain of a slave ship. Several factors contributed to Newton's conversion: a near drowning in 1748, the piety of his friend Mary Catlett, whom he married in 1750, and his reading of Thomas à Kempis's Imitation of Christ. In 1754, he gave up the slave trade and, in association with William Wilberforce, eventually became an ardent abolitionist. After becoming a tide surveyor in Liverpool, Newton came under the influence of George Whitefield and John and Charles Wesley and began to study for the ministry. He was ordained in the Church of England and served Olney and St. Mary Woolnoth in London. His legacy to the Christian Church includes his hymns as well as his collaborations with William Cowper in publishing Olney hymns, to which Newton contributed 280 hymns, including Amazing Grace. The tune setting for Newton's words, New Britain, was originally a folk tune probably sung slowly, with grace notes and melodic embellishments. The setting is from Edwin O. Excel's Make His Praise Glorious from 1900. Excel, who was born in Ohio, grew up in a German Reformed parsonage and worked as a bricklayer as a young man. In 1871, he became a singing school teacher. Soon after, while leading the music and singing solos in a Methodist revival, he experienced a conversion. Excel joined evangelist Sam P. Jones as a song leader, and the two traveled the United States as an evangelistic team. An important figure in the Sunday school movement, Excel wrote over 2,000 gospel songs and edited 90 songbooks. He became a very successful publisher of hymn books in Chicago. His company, Bigelow Maine Excel Company, eventually merged with Hope Publishing Company. our prayers and his prayers. The hymn we sing here is "It Is Well With My Soul." Penned by Horatio Spafford, a prominent American lawyer and Presbyterian elder, these words were written after a series of catastrophic losses had entered his life. In 1871, Spafford's real estate investments in Chicago were destroyed by the Great Fire of Chicago. 2 years later, he had planned to travel to Europe with his wife and 4 daughters. Business matters delayed Spafford from joining his wife and daughters on the steamship Ville du Havre. A steel sailing ship struck the steamer, killing 226 people, including all 4 of Spafford's daughters, who ranged in age from 12 years to 18 months. Only his wife Anna survived. As Spafford sailed to England to join his wife, he wrote, "It is well with my soul." The tune Ville du Havre was written by Philip Bliss, a singing evangelist who was acquainted with the Spafford family, and the tune was named after the ship that claimed their lives. Bliss's life was cut short at the age of 38 when a train accident cut his life short and the life of his wife.
So
Words to Live By. The hymn sung here is Rock of Ages. The author of this hymn, Augustus Toplady, was born at Farnham in Surrey, England on November 4, 1740. His father was an officer of the British Army. His mother was a woman of remarkable piety. He prepared for the university at Westminster School and subsequently was graduated at Trinity College in Dublin. While on a visit to Ireland in his 16th year, he was awakened and converted at a service held at a barn in Cody, Maine. The text used in that service was from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 13. But now in Christ Jesus, you who sometimes were far off are made close by the blood of Christ. The preacher was an illiterate but warm-hearted layman named Morris. Concerning this experience, Toplady wrote, "Strange that I, who had so long sat under the means of grace in England, should be brought close to God into an obscure part of Ireland amidst a handful of God's people met together in a barn, and under the ministry of one who could hardly spell his name. Surely this is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous." He was ordained to the ministry in the Church of England in 1762, and in 1768 he became vicar of Broadenhembury, a small living in Devonshire, which he held until his death at the age of 38. Caught in a storm when traveling alone through a gorge, Augustus Toplady sought shelter in a rock, which provided the inspiration for this text in 1763. The version most popular in the United States was sung to the tune written by Thomas Hastings, an American composer of sacred music. Good news. Our hymn here is What a Friend We Have in Jesus. The life of Joseph M. Scriven, the author of this text, was hard and filled with tragedy. At a young age, he had to give up his military ambitions due to poor health. Things were looking up as he prepared to be married, but on the eve before his wedding, his fiancée died tragically in a drowning accident. Scriven moved to Rice Lake, Ontario, and was soon to be wed again. His second fiancée, however, also died suddenly from an illness shortly before the wedding. With no job and a hard economy, Scriven had to live with friends and acquaintances. His volunteer work with the impoverished and sickly, as he tried to live as closely to the Sermon on the Mount as possible, was frowned upon by those friends, however, and they quickly disassociated themselves from him. Penniless and alone, Scriven was later found drowned in Rice Lake. It's a tragic story, and like all tragedies, hard to make sense of. And yet God still works in and through our stories and our losses to fulfill God's purposes. Shortly after Scriven moved to Ontario, it's said that he wrote the text, "What a Friend," to send back to his mother in Ireland to comfort her in a time of sorrow. After his publication, a neighbor asked if Scriven really did write it, and he replied, "The Lord and I did it between us." As one of the best-known hymns of comfort, it is certain that the Lord used Scriven to bless many people in their own times of sorrow. These words were set to a melody written by Charles C. Converse in 1868. Our next musical selection, under the heading of Good News, is a selection offered by the Salem Ensemble, "O Be Joyful in the Lord." "O Be Joyful in the Lord" was written by Curtis Beach, a United Church of Christ minister, who wrote the words to this hymn, which were set to an anonymous Hebrew melody.
So we offer ourselves. The hymn used here is Here I Am, Lord. The hymn's writer, Dan Schutte, was born in Neenah, Wisconsin on December 28, 1947, and he grew up in Elm Grove, Wisconsin, and graduated from Marquette University High School before entering the Society of Jesus. He was one of the founding members of the St. Louis Jesuits, who popularized a contemporary style of church music set to sacred texts sung in English as a result of the liturgical reforms initiated by the Second Vatican Council. Schutte was given short notice to write a hymn for the ordination service for a deacon and wrote this piece. A 2017 poll conducted by the National Association of Pastoral Musicians found among their members that Dan Schutte's hymn, Here I Am, Lord, placed second among songs that made a difference. blessed and sent with a promise. Our concluding hymn for today's service is On Eagle's Wings. Composed by Michael Joncas, a priest and Catholic liturgical composer back in the late 1970s, this hymn draws from Psalm 91, Exodus 19, and Matthew 13 for its imagery. It was written after he and his friend Douglas Hall returned from a meal to learn that Hall's father had died of a heart attack. It has become a popular piece as a contemplative hymn in Catholic masses as well as Protestant services of worship.